Alright, welcome to part one of Talk, Record, Play. I'm Lachlan Rouse and I'm one half of the My Muscle Project, and thank you for tuning in and learning about how you can start up your own podcast. Now, we're going to do 5 parts and we're going to go over every single part and what's involved. This is part 1 here, as you can see. Really quickly, I'm going to show you what's involved in all 5 parts. So if you have a look here, part 1, which we're going over today, is the setup. Part 2, we're going to be going over the gear that you need. Part 3, the recording and editing. Part 4 is going to be the uploading process. And then part 5 is going to be growth and monetization, which is the fun stuff. How you can build a business out of it, how you can make money out of it, how you can influence more people. So in this first part, there's 5 things that we want to go over. Now, at first, these may seem like the easy things, but ultimately, if you don't set these up properly in the beginning, then you will absolutely fail. And there's a statistic out there by Libsyn, which is the biggest podcast uploading platform in the world. It's what we upload our podcast to. It's what Joe Rogan uploads his podcast to. So their statistic is that 95 or 91% of podcasts don't make it past the 5th episode. So that tells you a lot about how tough this can be, this content creation. So if you're not in it for the long haul, if you're not really setting things up right at the start, you will ultimately fail. The statistics are against you. So we've been doing it for 4 years. This is how we've managed to never miss an episode every single week for the last 4 years. And in fact, we now release 3 episodes per week. And we've been doing that for a year. So this first part, obviously the first thing you want to think about is your name. There are a lot of podcast names out there. You have to really pick one that reflects what people are going to get when they come to the show. Ours is the My Muscle Project. People know, obviously, it's got something to do with some cognitive aspect and something to do with muscles with the body. So they're generally going to think a health and fitness podcast. That's what I would recommend by choosing your name. You can call it after yourself as well. Generally with podcasting, you can't really outsource it to anyone. So naming it after yourself or after your company is not a bad thing, because you will always be the host, most likely. So spend some time on the name. Throw some ideas around, write a big list of things, tell it to a few people before you actually decide on it and launch it. And also make sure someone else out there hasn't already taken it. So the second thing is going to be the style of podcast you do. So there's very, very popular styles out there, and there's also very unpopular styles out there. And you have to really choose what's going to play towards your strengths and weaknesses, and ultimately what you really want to do. So we are an interview-based podcast. So we started by interviewing guests, unedited, not live, but the full recording. And then we eventually moved on to kind of more conversational between 2 hosts. So there's 2 hosts of the show. Sometimes we interview 2 people, sometimes 1 person, and then sometimes just a conversation between the 2 of us. And then our third show of the week is less conversational and more instructional, as we give advice to other fitness business owners. And essentially what I'm doing now is helping you guys with your podcast. So a few styles to choose from: the interview, the conversations, the information style. There is other ways as well. You can, as a single podcast host, you can just give advice and read tips. You can choose anywhere from 3 hours down to 2 to 3 minutes. You can have ones that are completely pre-scripted, and you can just read off the script or the piece of paper. It's like a motivational 3 minutes for the day. And then there's obviously another style which is a little more advanced, which can involve a lot of editing, which is kind of like journalism and stories where you're piecing together a lot of audio. But I imagine a lot of you here today are probably not going to choose that style, but many different options out there for you. Make sure you're excited about the one that you choose. The third thing is the genre. This is pretty straightforward. Most of you guys are here because you listen to our podcast, and so you're probably thinking something along the health and fitness lines. But make sure you go into iTunes and the iTunes store and you do search all the categories and subcategories, because this is how people will find you and look for you. So make sure you're really clear on the genre that you want. Ours is fitness, well, it's health and then fitness and nutrition. But there are many aspects. You can do health, you can do psychology, you can do all different aspects of genre. So make sure you choose that correctly. The fourth thing is the target audience. So this is in this order because most likely by this point it's going to be pretty obvious who you're targeting and who your audience is that you're speaking to. But it's just something to keep in mind when you're thinking of the name Also thinking of the type of people you want to interview. Having some consistency in the beginning is more important. So if you're looking at our podcast, obviously we're a bit broader these days. We interview a lot of different people, from CrossFit to powerlifting to weightlifting to coaches to business people now. So we've branched off a lot, but in the beginning we really just focused on the CrossFit market, and that's what allowed us to grow to one of the biggest podcasts in Australia. So what I'd recommend is start really narrow with your audience, and then over time, as you build up that really strong base of followers, you can branch out a bit later. The final thing is commit. So make a commitment to a certain number of episodes, whether it's a weekly release, a bi-weekly release, a monthly release, whatever it is. If you don't commit in your very first episode, announcing it to your audiences that, hey, over the next 12 months, you can expect 1 episode a week, you can expect 1 episode a fortnight, 1 episode a month, whatever it is. If you don't make that public commitment, ultimately it's not going to get done. Okay? Those are the 5 things to consider in part 1. In the next video, part 2, we're going to be going over the gear that we use and the gear we have used in the past and that you guys will need to create a quality podcast.